This is awesome.
I don't remember any of this. This is unbelievable.
Most of our viewers too.
He's so much faster than a 29. Now I'm sitting here wondering how the 29 even wins this thing.
All right, welcome to another NASCAR Reacts here on the Money Lap. I'm Parker Kligerman, joined as always by Landon, Cassill. You may know us from our podcast, the Money Lap podcast. Last week, we did a react from the 2022 Rolex 24 finish in the GTD Pro class. That was absolutely epic. It was our most watched one yet, so we're growing like a weed, Landon. But this one is special. This is one we've seen basically requested in every single one of these. And K-Ben 24 basically was the one that we saw most recently requesting this, and that is the 2001 Cracker Barrel 500. One of the most epic mile-and-a-half, last 15 laps or so in NASCAR history. It also has a ton of historical undertones, of course, being the race after, the third race after Dale Earnhardt passed away in the 2001 Daytona 500. Landon, this is a good one.
I'm looking forward to this because, like a lot of these, I feel like there's a deep part of my soul that is attached to this race, except I only remember just about 100-yard stretch of it, and that is at the start-finish line taking the checkers. So I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of this.
So we're 15 laps to go, and you see two of the leaders, but this becomes eventually an absolute gaggle of leaders. Look at the rubber on the back here just before the Bud sticker. Look at that.
Oh my gosh, all the rubber buildup and lay down. You know, there's back then the tires had a lot more fossil fuel oils in the rubber than they do now. And nowadays the tires are, they're like greener, more eco-friendly, and they don't wear and lay down. Yeah, they've got like synthetic oils in them or whatever. I don't know exactly the makeup of them, but I know that in the last decade, when Goodyear changed the material or whatever, however they made them, is why the tires don't lay rubber on the track like they did back in the day.
That is one of the most under-talked about things that has occurred in the last 20 years in all of motorsports, I believe, but especially NASCAR, in why the races look so different, right? Is that there was this change, compound-wise, from natural fossil fuel-based tire construction to a synthetic construction. I think it happened somewhere around the mid-2000s when we started running into that issue of not laying rubber. That was in the midst of repaves. But if you look at this track, we're on board with Dale Jarrett right now. I mean, it is black from the white line to the wall, and we just don't see that as often anymore.
Well, and I think another way to put it to simplify, because at the end of the day, I don't know the actual engineering compound of the tires and what's going on there, but the magic is that something has changed that has caused the tires to interact with the track differently, right? Where lately we're going through all this hard tires, soft tires. They're trying to find solutions, and we just can't really put our finger on it. But at the end of the day, the one thing that's consistent nowadays is the tires aren't adhering to the track, laying down rubber, changing the dynamic of the track. It's very interesting, but it's crazy to see this from 2001.
Well, I know, and look at this. Now we're starting to get all these cars. So you got Jerry Nadeau leading, Dale Jarrett in second. That's Harvick that's coming in third. That's Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Jeff Gordon, and they're all sort of compressing together. And look at the noses of these cars. I love how high off the ground they are, and then they sit in the corners. This was pre-coil binding. They were starting to figure it out a little bit when I've talked to crew chiefs and such that worked at this era, where they maybe were coil binding a little bit in the corners, but they didn't quite realize they were even doing it, right? And so these were still, like we call it Hillbilly Springs, right, where it's made that the front end pops up off the ground on the straightaways and goes down on the corners. But with those cars, when you look at this, it just looks like you can see the visible movement of the race car, which I just think is so great from this era.
Let me kind of tune that up a little bit. So Hillbilly Springs is when you run a stiffer spring on the left than you do the right. That's the terminology for Hillbilly.
Right. I'm sorry.
What was going on back in this era, the technology migrated pretty quickly from a style of car setup that was called soft spring big bar, which means you ran soft front springs with a big sway bar. And this was towards the end of that soft spring, the middle to the end of the soft spring big bar era. And the soft spring big bar era morphed into the coil bind era because they were running softer springs, which generates more grip, to the point where they were just coil binding the springs, which means the spring just keeps traveling till it can't travel anymore. It binds all the coils. And then they learned that they can just stop the travel with coil bind springs. And so that's how soft spring big bar cars morphed into coil bind cars. And like you said, we're just on the front end of the technology during this era where the teams were running so soft that they started to coil bind by accident and then realized that they should be doing it on purpose.
Well, shit, that was one of the best explanations of the history of coil binding I've ever heard right here on NASCAR React with Money Lab.
And then
Landon,
from
Cassill.
from there, that's how coil binding morphed into bump stops, right? Because then we figured out that you can stop the travel with bump stops, and then you can control kind of how soft or hard the bump stops are. Coil binding, it's a pretty rigid feel.
Right here, Kevin Harvick knows nothing about that at this era because he's trying just to use the low line on Nadu and Dale Jarrett as they've all compressed to 5 cars right now that are, I mean, they're all within a half a second. This is incredible.
Isn't it amazing that we, in our current day, we're resorting to restrictor plates and all this stuff to try to get this kind of racing? When these guys had 700 or 800 horsepower back then, 900 horsepower maybe,
And
turning 10,000 RPMs.
Look at this little bump.
This is a race for the lead.
This is awesome.
I don't remember any of this. This is
Probably
unbelievable.
most of our viewers too. Oh my
Mind
gosh.
you, by the way, not to side note during the greatest intermediate race I've ever seen, this was also peak Fox booth, by the way.
Oh yeah, this was them at their height. This through 03, Darlington 03, this was their best. But look, it's 3 wide for the lead, now 3 wide for second, essentially. All using different lanes. Dale Jarrett gets a little wiggle. That moves Jeff Gordon from 5th to 3rd. Nadu goes to 2nd, Harvick to the lead, and now it's all going to swap again.
Gordon's got the top working. He's been working the top these last couple laps.
And look how, what he calls, back then the top, there's that white up next to the wall. No one runs the wall.
Right. So Junior just got absolutely pinned off of 4. He was trying to run the bottom, and he got super aero tight and killed a ton of momentum. Oh, no, he's got a tire going down.
Yeah, he's out.
So now it's
Now
a
this
4-man
is hurting.
race.
Nadu was hurting Gordon here because Gordon had the top rolling. Nadu moved up there to block him, similar to what we see these days, aero blocking. I think Jeff's got the best car at this point. Maybe he's protected his tires, running in 5th or whatever. Harvick gets out a little bit, but we kind of know where this is going to end up.
You know what's interesting is this track, the way they're running this track, and maybe it's the track, the tire, whatever, they're not rim riding the way that we started to rim ride the wall later on in the 2000s. This is kind of a diamond type run, even running the top.
Well, yeah, you can see that. I was pointing that out earlier because
you can look
see
at by
where
the rubber of the line.
Yeah, it's white up top in the areas that they don't enter. They don't enter right on the wall. Like, look at all that room up there. We would use that pocket nowadays. They don't use that. And then they get up there in the center, sort of like you're saying, diamonding, and then they come back off the wall again. It's just, I think that's just the nature of those cars back then, and they didn't know.
Yeah. He's so much faster than a 29. Now I'm sitting here wondering how the 29 even wins this thing. Well, it's aero. I mean, it's still, look at him aero blocking him.
Oh, this is a camera shot.
Yeah, whoa. Nice move.
That was a bit of a mistake.
Yeah. Last lap, white flag. I think they were trying to get the flagman, and I think the camera guy wasn't ready for it.
He wasn't ready. Yeah, he didn't know yet.
Okay, here we go. Look
I'd
at
probably
this
work
run.
with one of those guys. Yeah, this is a good. How does he even get there?
Oh,
He goes low. Harvick to the top, using the diamond line that we're talking about. Wow. What a run by Jeff.
Oh, inches. Oh, my gosh.
Damn, that never gets old.
So good.
So good. Wow. Yeah, that was a way better race than I even remember. Like, the whole 15 laps.
Oh my, yeah, absolutely. Well, as a 10-year-old kid, the one thing I remember is this is the moment I learned who Kevin Harvick was.
You and the
I mean,
rest
I
of the world.
already knew who he was from, racing in the Busch Series and taking over this car, but it didn't mean anything to me until this race.
Yep. I probably, come to think of it, probably the same thing. I don't remember that vividly, but I do know, I don't know if I would have known Kevin Harvick without all that went down. Some lovely things I remember from this just in terms of the numerology. Obviously, Dale Earnhardt, driver of the 3, passed away at the Daytona 500 2 races earlier. This was the 3rd race after that race.
Yeah.
The 29, which is, you could say 2.9, right? And Kevin Harvick being his replacement, that is the 3 team. So a lot of numerology and quite a moment
serendipitous.
for NASCAR. Yeah, and quite serendipitous. That's a good way to put it. I think when you look at this race, what it exposed to me and what you were talking about was it was the beginning of the end for non-aero, like fully understanding aero racing was this era. Maybe
Right.
01 to 03. By 04, coil binding starts to become a thing slightly. In 05, it's on, it's on like Donkey Kong. And from that day forward, we were talking, I think Kyle Busch winning California in 05 with like a fully coil bound setup is one of the ones I remember early on and people talk about. That changed the face of racing in NASCAR going forward. And so we now have to do so many things with horsepower, tires, car design, track design to try and replicate what that was doing naturally back then.
Yeah, exactly. It was definitely an interesting era. The technology moved super fast. I mean, we were only talking about the chassis and coil binding setups. This is also a huge aero development era as well. The bodies of these cars, I think, we don't have it teed up in this video, but go from this video and research 2001 Cup cars to 2006, 2007 Cup cars. It's essentially the same rules and body platform, but you'll see a huge difference between how those cars looked, and that's because of the aero technology that developed over that decade.
It's a great point. And engines. What was it, 01 to 02? Penske hits 11,000 RPM in these V8 engines. I mean, that's
a lot of that was regulated, though. NASCAR came out with gear rules back in the the 2006, 7, 8 eras when they really started reining in on RPMs and gear rules and things like that. But the body stuff, obviously the bodies changed and the manufacturer types changed, but it was really the same platform through that decade. But the teams just really dove into the wind tunnel and found tons of downforce and ways they could manipulate the bodies, which turned into the cars that, and I'm going to say it even though I hate it, but they call them Twisted Sister cars. Those were the cars right before the COT era that everybody know and loved of my generation. Beautiful race cars, hand built, all hand built steel bodied race cars. They were just incredible for stock cars.
I like to say hand massaged because they just sort of
They were
rolled them and
massaged for
massaged them into shapes that they became.
They did, though. It was literally an English wheel. They start with a 4x8 sheet of metal or whatever, 6x8. I can't remember how big the sheet metals were, but I used to love going into the Hendrick body shop during the 2000s when I was testing for Hendrick and see what they were building. But it just started with sheets of metal and everything was hand done with shrinker stretchers and English wheel and brakes and tack welded together and Bondo and everything. I mean, it was truly a work of art to build one of those race cars. And then it developed into stamped body parts, and and even then, the naysayers, and they hated it, right? And they said they took away the artwork out of the deal, but there was still a lot of creativity that went into those cars as well.
Definitely. Well, thank you all for watching. That's another Money Lap Reacts. Please like and subscribe, and let us know in the comments what you want us to react to next. We're taking all submissions across all motorsports. It doesn't just have to be NASCAR. This was fun. Thanks for watching.